Good morning, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. Any Knicks fans? So I'm 51 years old. So what is a 51-year-old policy wonk doing talking to you about social media? Well, I blog every day at drugwonks.com, so visit my blog and favorite it. It helps my Technorati rankings. I love Facebook. I'm a total addict. So if you are, who here is on Facebook? Please friend me. I will friend you back, I promise. I tweet semi-regularly, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about Foursquare, but I'm trying it out. All this to say that I've lived long enough to become an embarrassment to my children. Let me share with you something that was written that was not necessarily written for this purpose, but it certainly fits. And I quote directly. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. I think that if Charles Dickens had composed this today, it would have been as an introduction to the pharmaceutical industry and social media. In April of 2004, I was an associate commissioner at the FDA, and I wrote an article for Health Affairs about the FDA's draft guidance on direct-to-consumer advertising. The title was Turning Point or Tipping Point: How to Harness the Power of Direct-to-Consumer Advertising to Better Create Well-Informed Consumers and Better Potential Customers. The gist of my argument was that DTC shouldn't be viewed, strictly speaking, as a potent marketing tactic, but also as a robust tool to help advance the public health. But alas, my arguments fell on largely deaf ears. Call me Cassandra. 6.5 years later, wow, time flies, we're talking about social media, and it's exciting. People are searching for healthcare information online. They're like animals on the hunt. They go where the information scent is the strongest. The potential, as we all know, is absolutely enormous. Today, unquestionably, healthcare begins at search. But then, alas, there are all those pesky regulations. Angst about adverse events and off-label conversations, about correcting misinformation and responsibility for this new and thrilling and chilling and uncontrollable thing called user-generated content. When it comes to 21st century communications, consumer empowerment is both a blessing and a curse because you can't control it like advertising. And that causes regulatory headaches where rules are gospel and precedents preach. But beware of gospels and beware of precedents, because as Disraeli wrote, a precedent embalms a principle. A precedent embalms a principle. Advertising, in its most traditional sense, is a one-way medium designed to influence behavior through the thoughtful and creative use of words and images. If the medium is the message, then, in a sense, advertising is the antonym for social media. Social media, I believe, has to be considered within the broader context of social marketing. Consider the anti-Barry Goldwater Daisy ad. That was an early example of social marketing. The ad, famously shown only one time, started a national conversation, and the interactivity part played out in the voting booths across the nation. So in that respect, the Harry and Louises of today are the direct descendants of Miss Daisy. Social media is, by definition, social. Its driving force is interactivity between multitudinous constituencies, and the most important one being peer-to-peer. And that's frightening, and that's exciting, and that's the truth. Social media requires you to play, not purchase. You can't purchase passion. Remember, the medium is the message. Just how comfortable and capable is regulated industry when the new operating system is a world where the only constant is change? In a brave new world where marketing communications is as much about selling as it is about educating, finally. Last year, there was a Part 15 hearing. Anybody go to the Part 15 hearing? Anybody watch it on TV? It was must-see TV. It was the Super Bowl of FDA hearings. It comprised 2 days and and actually there was no wireless in the room. That came up quite a few times. 2 days and 70 presentations later, many questions had been raised, none were answered, and frustrations were vented, And there was a general feeling at the time that maybe something would come of that. But what does that mean? Well, to my mind, it means don't hold your breath. FDA operates in FDA time, which is defined as the time it takes to get it done right. And this is almost the opposite of social media, which is generally instant gratification. For those of you with children, you know what I mean. As a senior official said to me in the wake of the Part 15 hearing, we understand the issues of speed and timeliness. We just don't know how to deal with it. A very honest statement. Expectations that aren't understood can lead to disappointment and fear. They do lead to disappointment and fear. But as Marie Curie said, nothing in life is to be feared. It's only to be understood. Immediately after the Part 15 hearing, again, just a little over a year ago, I predicted an FDA guidance sometime in late 2010 or early 2011 that focused on 3 issues. 1, the range of adverse event reporting responsibility, not a redefinition of what an adverse event is, but regulated industry, what you're responsible for online. 2, ways to make MedWatch more visible, even to the degree of mandating perhaps a prominent display or a MedWatch icon on print, broadcast, and online advertising. And 3, the creation of a safe harbor of some kind that allows and hopefully encourages regulated industry to correct misinformation on the internet. Just 3 weeks ago, Tom Abrams, the DDMAC director, made me sound very prescient when he said some social media guidance might be released by the end of the year and will address issues related to internet drug promotion, but not specifically how to use tools like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What we're going to do, said the FDA's promotional panjandrum, is address questions like how to respond to unsolicited requests for information, what's the corporate responsibility for correcting and monitoring third-party sites for misinformation, what's the corporate accountability for having people post promotional videos, and things like that, close quote. And things like that. How helpful, how precise. And according to a recent piece in the Pink Sheet, according to a recent report in the Pink Sheet, the agency said DDMAC is not working on draft guidance for issues related to internet adverse event reporting because it is, quote, outside its purview. Here's the current FDA guidance on internet-related responsibility, a quote directly from the FD&C. Applicants should review any internet sites sponsored by them for adverse experience information, but are not responsible for reviewing any internet sites that are not sponsored by them. So I predict that we'll see something that sounds and looks very much a lot like that. In other words, a long wait for more of the same. Another victory of ambiguity, which regulators love since it gives them unlimited authority, over predictability. Surprisingly, when you're asked what you're waiting for to take a deeper dive into social media, people in industry generally say, guidance from the FDA. Who has said that? Who said what we're really waiting for is guidance from the FDA? Don't turn around, Paul. But you have to ask yourself, really, guidance from the FDA? What do you want? During a past episode of Mad Men, who here watches Mad Men? Oh, yeah. The creative team at Sterling Cooper was hard at work brainstorming a woman's product campaign. And someone asked, what do women want? And Roger Sterling says, who cares? But when it comes to social media, you have to ask yourself, what does pharma want? And who cares? Many will say regulation from the FDA, but is that really what you want? Is it really what you need? What does pharma want? Many say pharma wants the ability to engage in social media. My response is that whether or not, the real question should be whether or not pharma has the will to engage, because they certainly have the ability if they choose to use it, and where there's a will, there's a way. Another issue is the need to bifurcate the conversation of digital advertising from that of social media. There are rules for digital advertising, paid digital advertising, like sponsored Google links. Social media, on the other hand, really is the new frontier. Social media is the crucial gray zone that exists between regulated speech on the one hand and user-generated content on the other. It's really where the rubber meets the road. What pharma wants, or should want, is specific areas of clarification from the FDA on this new and exciting zone of opportunity. What about the empowered digital healthcare consumer that we hear so much about? What do they think about the absence of regulated industry from the social media space? Well, civilians, by whom I mean patients, have no idea why regulated industry opts to absent themselves from disease-related social media conversations. They assume is because industry is afraid of mixing it up with real people in real-time dialogue. And they're right, at least partially, but for reasons they don't suspect. Clearly, explanations of adverse event reporting and other compliance-related issues don't resonate because they don't care. Consumers are ignorant of your problems and they don't care, and you can't make them care. Consumers are smart. That regulated industry actively runs away from proactively unearthing adverse experiences in social media just reinforces the general public's notion that industry communications are just about money and not about them. As the saying goes in our nation's capital, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Industry's general response is blame the FDA, but that's not fair, and I don't think that it's true. How can the agency be blamed for industry's reluctance to push the boundaries even a little? Fear of warning letters? Fear of unearthing adverse events? I say where there's a will, there's a way. If you won't blaze the path even a little, then don't expect anyone to know where you want to go. Unfortunately, blazing new territory through real-time learning is not, shall we say, historically a tradition of regulated industry. Everyone wants to do new and exciting things. Second, here is an even more basic question. What's the right thing to do? I submit that it's irresponsible to actively avoid participating in social media because, to directly quote CEDAR Director Janet Woodcock, social media is where the people are. Social media is where the people are, to which industry generally responds, that's why we need more directive regulation from the FDA. I fundamentally disagree. One, that's what's needed, and two, that's what's coming. Let me explain. In my humble opinion, we need more regulation. Just does not cut it. Since there is no direct ask from industry, it's really impossible to expect the FDA to offer direct and relevant guidance. It's not like requesting guidance for DTC advertisements. Those are precise requests with a tangible deliverable that result in specific rules and regulations. More regulation? Be careful, because that may be precisely what you get. Also, more guidance means nothing without a more precise reference, more relative to what aspects of social media. These details were lacking at last November's Part 15 hearing, and alas, equally so in the lengthier but equally nonspecific docket submissions that followed. What are the odds, really, lacking direction, expertise, and experience, that DD Mac will deliver some kind of Deus ex machina solution? Expecting the regulatory holy grail will only lead to disappointment and frustration. And blaming the FDA when that happens won't make anything better or move the social media agenda any further ahead. If industry is expecting to climb the steps of the agency's headquarters at White Oak on its knees, kiss an FDA relic, and miraculously throw away the crutches hobbling our ability to participate in social media, well, there had better be a plan B. Where there's a will, there's a way. Then there's the question of language and syntax. For example, what does sponsored really mean? Let's do a brief thought experiment. Consider a televised PGA Tour event. Now, when a product logo for an erectile dysfunction drug appears on the screen and the announcer intones, "This portion of the Masters is brought to you by," kind of drug name here. Nobody in the viewing audience thinks that the sponsor chose the speed of the greens, the height of the rough, the pairing of the golfers in the tournament, but say sponsored on an interactive social media site and watch the sparks fly at internal regulatory review. 4. This also leads to the still vague regulatory distinction between property owner and property user, an issue in dire need of FDA clarification. Discussion of this important social media issue in the FDA docket submissions, try and find it. And of course, there's a subtle but crucial differentiation between permissible and appropriate. Social media's community norms do not match up all that well with FDA's regulated norms. And this returns us, I think, to where we started. What does pharma want? Do you want social media primarily as a new channel for marketing, or do you see it as a new and exciting and robust and dynamic mechanism for advancing the public health through real-time, interactive communications? Why not both? Where there's a will, there's a way. And at the end of the day, the issue of social media and FDA regulations, I think, was summed up nicely by another senior member of the FDA Brain Trust who told me privately that, quote, "We need to learn to talk to people the way they talk to each other." And that's going to create a culture shift at the FDA. Just so, and just as it should be in marketing departments across regulated industry. Gina King is a special assistant to Tom Abrams over at JD Mac, and she made an interesting comment the other day. She said, quote, "If you choose to do promotion in social media, just make sure that at the end of the day, what we're looking at is in the best interest of the public health." And that's sound advice that is worth remembering, and I think it reinforces the truth that social media cannot be used in the same way as advertising. Social media is interactive, and it is interactively egalitarian. So rather than rubbing the magic lamp and wishing for FDA guidance, I think we need to burn the midnight oil and work harder to make healthcare communications via social media a reality, because an educated consumer really is our best customer. Hyman Rickover was the father of the American nuclear navy, and I'll share a quote with you of his to end. Admiral Rickover said, "Good ideas are not adopted automatically. They must be driven into practice with courageous patience." Courageous patience. Is that so much to ask? Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to introduce you to my friend Julie Zawitza. Julie is the Director of Communications over at CEDAR. She's a thinker and a doer and knows what needs to get done, and I think really wants to help us do the right thing and help the agency do the right thing. Julie.